The big question is, which one is better? The M. Night Shyamalan atrocity or the Netflix show? Come on.
No! 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 No!
What's up, Netflix fans? Welcome back to the channel. Avatar The Last Airbender, the original series, is one of my favorite shows of all time. It's right in that age range where I have nostalgia for it, but I also recognize how good it actually is. So, they're remaking it, live action, on Netflix. 8 episodes for the first season. Book 1, is it good? I'm out of breath.
Breathe, darn you! Gah!
The Fire Nation is embarked on a dark path, and the world might never recover.
The young boy known as the Avatar must master the 4 elements to save the world and fight against an enemy bent on stopping him. This is rated PG-14, just enough in there to appeal to adults, but also a show to where it's trying to get a younger demographic to maybe care more about Avatar. But again, it doesn't matter what age you see the original show. If you've seen it, you probably love it. I mean, genuinely, some of the best animated stuff I've ever seen. It's so good.
I get it.
So, you've got a lot to live up to here. The original creators, they did have a hand in this series and a handful of episodes, but for the most part, they are bringing in new people and creating a bit of a different atmosphere, but also hitting the beats that we see in season 1 of the animated series, except they're kind of condensing that and scrunching it into 8 episodes. So obviously you're going to lose some things, but at least I didn't want a one-for-one adaptation, the same exact thing. If you're going to do it in live action, you have to somewhat switch it up, but keep the characters, their development, and the heart. I'm asking a lot. I'm a huge fan. What do you want me to say? If you saw my reaction for episode 1, you know that I had some up and down thoughts. For the most part, I saw a lot of potential in this series. I had issue with some of the dialogue in terms of exposition. Literally, characters giving speeches and going on spiels and feeding us information that they could have otherwise showed us. And, you know, again, I was younger when I watched the original series, but I felt as if they didn't do that. They weren't as heavy-handed when it came to exposition in this show, and I guess it's only because it's 8 episodes. They just kept feeding us information. One of the older characters in the Water Tribe, she just goes on this big monologue and tells us basically everything we need to know, and I'm like, that is so on the nose. I did not like that whatsoever, and it was also just kind of awkward in its delivery because it's basically the character saying, hey, audience, here's what's going on. Here's what we're doing.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
And then the characters will also say and do things in the show. They're like, well, you know, here's what I need to do. Here are my thoughts, and here is what I plan on doing, instead of just talking like a normal person. And so I felt as if the dialogue really struggled to hone that in. Now, as we moved out of episode 1 into the latter parts of the season, I did feel a little bit of improvement there. It felt like the actors got more comfortable in their roles. It felt like the characters didn't feel as if they had to feed the audience information, and it just felt more natural, especially by the time we got to the final episode. Everything, the performances, the interaction, the chemistry, it felt real as opposed to feeling a bit more manufactured. And I saw a review on Twitter. I didn't read the review, but a reaction said, this feels like an AI-generated Avatar series and taking things from the original and just doing away with the heart. And I'm like, yeah, I guess I get what you're saying because of the exposition and all those things in the first episode, but you have to give a series time. You have to give it time to breathe, and you can't make a final judgment based off of one episode. And I do have issues with the rest of the season, but I do feel as if there is some heart here, and you can tell they tried to keep intact a lot of the things that worked about the original show, whether it be moments or characters or just story beats. A lot of those are there, and I can tell there is a passion from the people behind this. And again, the original creators were involved here, but not all of the time. And I did feel in each episode at least 1 or 2 moments that had a lot of heart and really focused on developing these characters in such little time. Look, I know it's 8 episodes, but there's a lot they got to get through here. And it does occasionally feel like they're just kind of speeding through it. But I try to imagine this from the perspective of someone who hasn't watched the original show. They could be watching this and saying, yeah, I guess it does feel kind of rushed. but I do like a lot of the things that they're trying to do and the ideas. And really, this is all about a bunch of kids going to war. It kind of feels like a war series in a way, even more so than the animated show, because it doesn't have as much humor there. It doesn't rely as much on comedy as book one does, the original book one. So there is a lot here that makes it feel grand and epic in a way that the original series never did. Again, I like the other one a lot more. I just like that they pronounce the characters' names like they did in the original show, unlike another movie that sucks.
Oh shit, I'm sorry.
I'll talk about the visuals and the bending and all of that stuff here in a second, but I have to talk about the characters. These individual characters are so important and integral to what this series is. Aang, played by Gordon Cormier, is... he has a very similar vibe to the Aang that we know and love. He has that childlike innocence. He's faced with something that he has to do. It is his destiny, but he is hesitant now, and this came out before the show. He doesn't have as much fun as he did in the original show. He's not going off on these little adventures and doing these little childlike things. I did miss that, to be honest with you. That's what being a kid is all about, and because they took that away from this series, I didn't feel as if there was as much there. He wasn't as dynamic of a character, but as we move through season one, you can see these things start to bother him, and his destiny is a big deal. So he is dealing with that, he is bothering with that, and it's not like he doesn't act like a kid on occasion and have fun. It's just, I missed a lot of the side quests, and I missed a lot of the silliness from the original show. They kind of do away with the silliness here, and that was somewhat of a bummer because that was such an integral part of what Avatar was all about. Katara and Sokka. It took me a second to warm up on these two characters. Sokka, just the way that he acts, very similar to the Sokka that we know, but there are some elements of his character missing that they don't really explore here that I did miss, because that made him more compelling in the original series, but just based off of the performance, it's actually pretty spot on. Again, some of the dialogue, some of the delivery, you can pick who to fault here, whether it be the writer or the actor, but they're young actors. You got to give them a shot to kind of grow and lean into their characters. And honestly, season one of the original show, it was also a similar thing of, okay, you have to give it a few episodes to really fall into what it actually is. And I felt the same way about this series. Katara, one thing I really missed about that dynamic between Katara and Aang is I didn't feel the amount of chemistry and that specific relationship that I felt in the original series, but I did warm up to it by the end. And the final episode, there are some moments between them. I'm like, okay, they could build on this and grow it in season two just to make it a little bit better. I was enamored with Zuko in the first episode. He even sounded like Zuko from the original series, and he does throughout. Now, there are times in the show where Zuko tries to be stern and direct and, I guess, angry, and it does kind of come across as a kid throwing a tantrum, but at the same time, you look at who he is and what he's been through and really his age, and adults could look at that as a child throwing a tantrum. I didn't see that as a kid. I saw a menacing, villainous character, but now seeing it in the show being a little bit older, I'm like, yeah, somebody just shut the kid up. He's just throwing a tantrum. But I guess that's kind of who his character is. It's what his father sees him like. Maybe I'm the Fire Lord. But the actor did a nice job. Uncle Iroh is, really good. The voice is different. You have to get used to the voices just being so different. But come on, they can't do the same exact thing. Really good, compassionate, a little bit of silliness there when it comes to he and food, and sometimes he'll say those quirky things. I'm like, yeah, that's what Uncle Iroh would do or say, man. I can't wait. Y'all know what moment I'm waiting for with Uncle Iroh. I can't wait to see that. Dae Kim as the Fire Lord. Not a ton to do in this season, but that's the same thing as the original show. You can tell he's going to be menacing when we actually get that. Azula, it was an interesting choice introducing her like they did in this season. I don't know if it was as necessary as they see it, but then you start to think about it and you're like, yeah, I guess you can now see how he was grooming her to become what Zuko ultimately thought he was going to become. And they explore that more so in the season. Again, give and take. You're taking things away from what we knew, and you're building up a character like Azula when we didn't get that before. Interesting. I don't know if I love the approach, but I like the idea of it. Also, Ken Leung as Commander Zhao. I was questioning his intensity at first, but I started to really warm up to the character, and he does have that presence in the final episode that you expect from Commander Zhao. So, not as intense as the original character, but he does a nice job. Austin, as a fan, what's your biggest issue with this show? Honestly, it is, and it's not even the story construction, because it is the same story, and again, they're giving you those really integral moments, and one song specifically that dun, 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 that I'm humming as it's going. I'm like, okay, that's a great moment for the fans. One particular person that sells vegetables, that's not a spoiler. I want those moments. I want those moments in something like this, and they do deliver on some of these moments that had me smiling. I couldn't help it. I was smiling. All of that being said, the actual dialogue, the words that they are saying to each other, again, expositional, yes. There are times in this show where I'm like, it just doesn't seem like two actual people talking to each other. The humanity is lacking in that moment. And again, I don't know whether to fault the performances or the dialogue. I'm going to go with the script, because at times the script was not all there. And I see what they're trying to do, but it just doesn't land. And it comes across as a little like, okay, you could have done that a little bit better, or just taken out that moment in its entirety. And it did start to bother me as we went, because it's in every episode, and I keep waiting for it to go away, and it never really does. Also, I'm divided on the visuals. I think the fight sequences and the choreography and just Aang and the way that he moves, and a little bit of CGI at times. It's kind of CGI heavy, but it looks really cool, and I think they did a fantastic job. The stunt work and the bending, man. The coolest for me was the fire bending on the big screen. I've always wanted to see it done right. Shyamalan, done right, because that was atrocious. I don't know what that was. This is so much better, and anytime we get those fight sequences, sometimes the camera's going a little too crazy and we're cutting away and we don't get to see that choreography play out, but it's still cool. On the other side of things, I do believe the lighting was a bit of an issue at time. And Austin, you sound so pretentious. The lighting? Yeah, I mean, you look at the original animation, it's never going to top that. But it's also like that was so colorful, and the blues and the way that it all looked, and that final episode of the original animated series was so gorgeous. You know what happens with the moon and the spirits and all of that. And they try to capture those moments in this season in the live action. And sometimes it comes across like they're on a sound stage, or they've got these manufactured lights shining on characters, and that's how you make a movie, how you make a TV show. But you can make it look a bit better, I feel, than they made it look in this series, and it just didn't fully work for me. And there are things that they very clearly do behind the scenes here, where they are shooting, how they are shooting this, that they just come across as too fake for me, when I feel as if they could have done it to where it looked a bit more real, or even a bit more grounded, but keep that colorful, beautiful look intact, as opposed to sequences that are just a bit too dark, a bit too dreary, a bit too dull, not as vivid as they need to be. And we get a few of those scenes that are just beautiful to look at in this series, but it definitely has that Netflix feel. The best thing I can say about this show, I loved the intimate moments between the characters. There's one sequence where Aang and Zuko have a chance to talk and converse with each other, just like they did in the original show, but I feel like they stay on it a bit more and give them some more time to carry out that conversation. I really started to feel what I felt for those characters in the original series. And I know I keep making comparisons. Look, if you've never seen the original show, you have nothing to compare this to, and you will probably love it, or you'll think they're moving through this a little too quick, and they are. When you compress that much into that little, you're just going to feel it, and you definitely feel it here. But I do, again, I feel the passion from those involved that they at least tried to capture the essence of the original series, and they get there at times, and there's some very beautiful moments in the final few episodes that I was actually really impressed with. I want to know, do you want to see a spoiler review? I'd love to dive more into detail, but I don't want to do it unless you want to see it. So if you want to drop a thumbs up on this video, that tells me you'd like a spoiler review, and I could talk about this a bit more. And of course, let me know what you think. The Last Airbender attempts to do the impossible. Reviving a beloved series and attempting to capture the same amount of heart is not easy. While it does occasionally feel awkward in its execution, the passion shines through. There is enough here to build off of, up and down throughout the season, but at the end of the day, I am looking forward to seeing on how they grow in Season 2 and how they handle the characters that are introduced and like Azula built off of at that point. But I want to know what you all think. The passionate fans, are you going crazy? Is this a detriment? Is this the downfall of Netflix? Or were you actually kind of like, all right, let's see what they do next? And for me, I am interested to see what they do next, even though I did have my issues. Thanks so much for watching. I'll be seeing you very soon with more Avatar talk and more Dune talk.